So in this very lesson, we want to look at solving a quadratic equation using the factorization approach. Solving a quadratic equation using the factorization method or approach. Now we know that the quadratic equation is of the form where a, b, and c all come from the set of what? Real numbers. So to solve a quadratic equation, in other words, to find the value for x, we satisfy this quadratic equation. We are going to follow these steps that I have outlined here. So the first step says that we should multiply a by c. And we know that a is the coefficient of what? X squared. And then c is the constant. So we are going to multiply a by what? C. Now once we have the product of a and c, we find the factor pair of AC. It means that we are going to look for two numbers that when we multiply, it is going to give us these products. That when we sum them, it should give us what? The coefficient of what? X, which is what? B. Now once we have these two pairs, we are going to substitute this in place of what? B. Now once we substitute it, we are going to get 4 terms. Now once we have 4 terms, we can factorize by grouping. And then we equate the factors to 0 to solve for the x that we are looking for. So let's look at our first example. We want to solve this quadratic equation. In other words, we want to find the value for x which satisfy this quadratic equation. So the first thing that we are going to do is to identify our a, our b, and then our c. So from that, our a is equal to what? 1. Our b is equal to 5. And then our c is equal to 6. So the first step says that we should multiply what? A by c. So we know that our a is 1. Our c is what? 6. That gives us what? 6. Now once we have this 6, we are going to look for two numbers that when we multiply, it will give us positive 6. And these numbers are, we have 1 times 6 will give us what? 6. We also know that 2 times 3 will also give us what? 6. We also know that minus 1 times minus 6 will give us positive 6. And then we also know that minus 2 times minus 3 will also give us what? 6. Now once we have this factor pairs of 6, we'll be looking at which one of them will give us this 5 when added. Which one of these factor pairs will give us positive 5 when added. So we know that these 2 plus 3 will give us what? 5. So once we have these two factor pairs, we are going to substitute it in place of what? 5x. So we have our x squared plus 2x plus 3x plus 6 is equal to 0. Now from this, you can see that we are having 4 terms, 1, 2, 3, 4. So anytime we have 4 terms, we can factorize by grouping. So we are going to group the first 2 terms, and then we group the last 2 terms, and then we factorize them. So we know that x is here, x is also here, so we can bring one of the x's out. So we are going to have this x. Now one of the x is out, we are left with what? 1x. Now this x is out, we are left with what? 2. Now we have 3 and then 6. We can factorize 3 out because 3 can divide 6. Now this 3 is out, we are left with what? X. Then we have plus 3 into 6, how many times? 2. And all of this is equal to 0. Now anytime we factorize by grouping, the terms within the 2 brackets must be the same. The terms within these 2 brackets must be the same. Now once they are the same, we are going to pick those terms outside the bracket. We also put them in a nice bracket. So we are going to pick this 1x and then this 3. So we have x plus 3. We put them in a nice bracket. Since this is the same as this, we can pick any of the brackets. So let's pick this. X plus 2 is equal to 0. Now once we have this, we equate the factor to 0 and then we solve for x as easy as that. So we have our, let's continue from here. We have x plus 3 is equal to 0, and then we have x plus 2 is equal to 0. So from here, you can see that our x is equal to what? Minus 3. And then from here, we can see that our s is equal to what? Minus 2. So the value for s which satisfy these quadratic equations are s is equal to minus 2 or s is equal to minus 3, as easy as that. Let's look at one more example. So we want to solve this quadratic equation. In other words, we want to find the value for x which satisfy this quadratic equation. So the first thing is to identify our a. Our a is equal to 2. Our b is equal to minus 3. And then our c is equal to positive 1. Now once you have this, we are going to follow these steps that I have outlined here. So the first step says multiply a by c. So this is our a, this is our c. So we are going to multiply them. That gives us 2. Now once we have these 2, we find the factor pair of what? These 2. That when we add them, it will give us what? B, which is the coefficient of what? X. So this means we are going to find two numbers that when we multiply, it should give us positive 2. So we can talk of 1 times 2. We can also talk of minus 1 times minus 2. All of these will give us what? Positive 2. Now once we have these factor pairs, we look at which one of these factor pairs will give us negative 3 when added together. So we can look at minus 1 minus 2 will give us what? Minus 3. So it means that these two numbers, when we sum them, it will give us minus 3. So we are going to substitute these two factor pairs in place of what? Minus 3. So we have 2x squared minus x minus 2x plus 1 is equal to 0. Since we are having 4 terms, we can factorize by what? Grouping. So we are going to group the first 2 terms and then group the second. So let's factorize. We know that x is here, so we can bring one of the x's out. So one of the x is out. We are left with what? 2x. Then we have minus. Now this x is out. We are left with what? 1. Then we have minus. Now we know that 1 is a factor of every number. So you can factorize 1 out. You will still be left with what? 2x. But this side is positive. And we have negative here. So we are going to have negative 1. And all of this is equal to 0. So as I've been saying, whenever you factorize by grouping, the terms within the two brackets must be the same. And once you have that, we are going to pick those terms outside the bracket. You also put them in a nice bracket. So you are going to pick x minus 1. You put them in a bracket. And since these two brackets are having the same terms, we can pick any of them. So let's pick this one. 2x minus 1 is equal to 0. Our interest is to find what? The value for x which satisfies the quadratic equation above. So we have x minus 1 is equal to 0. And then we have 2x minus 1. It is also equal to 0. Now from here, you can see that our x is equal to what? Positive 1. And from here, we know that 2x will give us 1. Dividing both sides by 2. This will cancel this. We have our s is equal to 1 over 2. So the value for x which satisfies this quadratic equation is either s is equal to 1 or s is equal to half. As easy as that. This brings us to the end of today's lesson. See you tomorrow. Bye bye.